wonderful words of life, words of life and beauty. Teach me faith and duty, beautiful words, wonderful words, wonderful words of life, beautiful words, wonderful words, wonderful words of life. Christ the Blessed One gives to all wonderful words of life. Sinner leads to the loving call, wonderful words of life. All so freely given, wooing us to heaven. Beautiful words, wonderful words, wonderful words of life. Beautiful words, wonderful words, wonderful words of life. Sweetly echo the gospel call, wonderful words of life. Offer pardon and peace to all, wonderful words of life. Jesus, only Savior, sanctify forever. Beautiful words, wonderful words, wonderful words of life. Beautiful words, wonderful words, wonderful words of life. Amen.
Thank you very much. This time we want to invite our first speaker, Dr. Chidi. Doc, please, you are welcome to take us through the health message.
Yeah, I'm privileged to be in Minnesota at this time with this sort of weather. Yes, I understand it can be a little bit cooler, so I'm grateful that I'm still getting the vitamin D whilst I'm here. And vitamin D has a lot to, can we have the slide up please? Vitamin D has a lot to do with this subject that I'm talking about today. In the last few days, I've been going through the life colors, and we've been going through the different colors. Each color represents a different disease, but today we are going to be dealing with the yellow color. And the yellow color represents, yes, it certainly represents the sun, but it also represents autoimmune disease. Okay, so I'm just going to wait for that to come up. There's always technical problems. You know, sometimes I prefer not to do slides at all. I can just talk, and that's often better. Right, so we've gone through these colors, and here we are. So I've actually entitled this Friendly Fire. Friendly Fire. And you'll probably see why. You know, every time you wake up, you listen to the news, there's some problem. There's either some problem or a war going on in the world, right? At the moment there are several big wars going on. Now, war is tragic because people die. Every time you go to war, somebody has to die. But something that's even more tragic is when the people that die are killed mistakenly by their own side. And we call that friendly fire. You know, usually friendly fire for us, Europeans, means that the Europeans are on the ground and the Americans are in their planes and they're mistakenly killing their own members. Friendly fire is tragic, but it's also tragic when it relates to our own bodies. See, our bodies have this issue, and we call it autoimmune disease. Autoimmune disease. Now, autoimmune disease, it comes from our immune system. We have a beautifully designed immune system. Even our skin is part of it. Skin keeps out bacteria, viruses, infections. It's quite complicated. We have these wonderful white blood cells that go around the body like soldiers looking for trouble. You don't even have to think about it. You know, they go out, they seek out and destroy cancer, as we heard yesterday, but they also seek out and destroy bacteria and infections. Okay, this is not working again. Nope. Okay. Well, let me talk a little bit more about it anyway. So, there are lots of things that are trying to invade the body. Always trying. It's just like there's a war going on outside that they're trying to get inside of our bodies. Viruses, bacteria, worms, all sorts of things. And our bodies, we have these, it is like a military operation. It's like a military operation. And these white blood cells, they put themselves in different parts of the body, as you can see here. We call them lymph nodes. These lymph nodes are filled with antibodies and white blood cells. We've got the thymus gland here. The spleen is probably one of the biggest reservoirs of immune cells. But even in our bones, you know, you've heard of bone marrow. Bone marrow is where we make blood cells, the red blood cells and the white blood cells. And these soldiers position themselves in these places waiting for an invader. And when the invader comes, we are able to pick them up. This is how the immune system works. A virus or a bacteria invades the body, the antibodies attach it. By the way, it's kind of a proof of the miracle of God, our bodies, in that you have antibodies for every single protein on the planet, even if you never come across that protein. So think about the feather or the hair of a polar bear that you'll probably never come across. You've got antibodies already for it. So anything that invades your body, you'll have a few antibodies that are there to seek out and destroy the bacteria. We talked about cancer yesterday. This is what cancer looks like. That big pinky purple thing is cancer, and the green cells are the white blood cells that are attaching to it to destroy it. So this happens whether you're awake or asleep. You don't even have to think about it. Your body is defending you. But autoimmunity is where it all goes wrong. So instead of attacking the foreign invaders, these antibodies start to attack different parts of your own body. Anywhere there is tissue in your body, you will have antibodies to it, and it causes all sorts of problems. Now, you know these autoimmune problems. When I was in medical school, there was all these weird names of diseases. Most of them were autoimmune, but you know the ones, thyroid disease, right? You've heard of that. Parkinson's. Multiple sclerosis, Parkinson's, inflammatory bowel disease, rheumatoid arthritis. All of these problems are under the umbrella of an autoimmune disease. There are hundreds of them. Wherever you have tissue, you'll have a reaction to that tissue. Now, you have to ask yourself, why does this happen? I'm going to move on. First of all, let me say that it happens to black people more than it happens to white people. It happens to women much more than it happens to men. So black women are at the most risk. And I'm grateful there are more black women in this room today. In fact, I do have a talk, it's called What's Up with Black Women? That's what men always want to know. What's up with black women? But actually, we're talking about autoimmune disease. It affects black women much more than anybody else. In fact, when I was training as a doctor, I was training in a place in North London called Hampstead, and there are very few black people that live in Hampstead. And I remember that I was sitting with a professor, and that professor was seeing all these patients come in, and half of the patients were black women. And I'd ask him, well, why is this? What's the problem? Now, he's a professor in this subject, and he just said, we don't know. We don't know. No investigation, no research, just, we don't know, it just seems to be a coincidence. It's not a coincidence. There's a reason why black women have it worse than everybody else to it. So anemia, I'm pretty sure many of the women in this room have suffered from anemia at some stage. That is an autoimmune problem 95% of the time. So if you want to get rid of anemia, rather than just taking iron tablets for the rest of your life, you need to get to the root cause and get rid of it. Okay, these are some of the other autoimmune diseases: vitiligo, lupus, type 1 diabetes, and many, many more. Why does it happen? Well, like most things, it all starts in the gut. You see, our gut is perfectly designed to absorb everything that we need to consume and keep out everything we don't need. But sometimes that gut lining breaks down. It breaks down and we call it a leaky gut. Now, it can happen when we are stressed, it can happen when we're on medication, it can happen if we had sorts of trauma, but then large proteins that are not supposed to get into the bloodstream, pass into the bloodstream because you're leaky. When these big proteins get into the bloodstream, your antibodies identify them as foreign. And if they're foreign, they should be attacked and destroyed, and that's what they do. But then what they do, they look for anything in the body that appears like the thing they've just destroyed. They look for the genetic code, so it could be the joints, it could be your thyroid gland, anything they can find that looks similar, it will start to attack. And they will multiply and multiply, and that's where you get thyroid disease, Parkinson's, and all these other diseases. So it starts in the gut. But that's the lining. Okay, now let me go back. Yeah, so at the bottom there, you can see there's a bit of research there from the New England Journal of Medicine. New England Journal of Medicine, 1992. And it was looking at, why do children get type 1 diabetes? Why do children get type 1 diabetes? And they discovered that all of these children had loads of antibodies to bovine protein. What does bovine protein mean? What's bovine? From the cow, especially milk. So it was the milk that we were giving all of our children, cow's milk that we were giving our children, that was triggering type 1 diabetes. And we've known that since 1992, and we're still giving all of our children loads of cow's milk. The New England Journal of Medicine is probably one of the most respected published journals for medicine in the world. Okay, they're all a bit tarnished now, but it is still one of the most respected. So we knew back then that milk has something to do with it. And when I was talking about big proteins getting through leaky, really milk proteins are the biggest ones to trigger it. So my first thing is going to be, you're going to have to avoid cow's milk. And so when you're on your mother's breast and you're getting the right milk for you, no problem. When you start having cow's milk, big problems. As I said yesterday, by the time you've weaned off of your mother's breast, you don't even have the enzymes to break down milk. What else causes a leaky gut? Inflammation. And anything where you have lots of refined sugar, you have lots of inflammation. Sugar makes everything inflamed. So it does it in two ways. It makes the gut inflamed to cause the gut to be leaky, but then it also causes the end organ to be inflamed. So the thyroid gland, the brain, the heart, everything starts to become inflamed. Okay. Now, I keep talking about sugar, don't I? I keep talking about sugar. By the way, I probably have a worse issue with sugar than anybody else in this room. No, can't be. You're You're lying, Dr. Chidi. I don't believe you. No, I do. Okay, let me give you a demonstration of my history. I'm going to confess to you, all right? Is that okay? All right. Because we're not perfect. People who stand up here are not perfect, right? It's the same with preachers, and it's the same with doctors. We are not perfect. So I'm going to share with you. Keep it to yourself. Now, one day, I was at home. I tell you I have a problem with sugar. My mother visited me. She brought a huge cake. I said to her, but you know my problem. How could you bring this cake into the house? Look, you know, sometimes you can have a little bit of variety. That's what my mum said. But that's okay for her because she can take a little bit of cake and leave it. That's not the same for me. I said, look, Mum, can you just put that cake away so that I can't see it? She put it in the fridge. All day, I'm thinking about the cake. Can't get my work done. I'm just thinking about the cake. I go to bed. I'm lying in bed thinking about the cake. So I can't sleep now. How am I going to go to sleep? How am I going to go to sleep? So I said to myself, maybe if I go down and have a look at the cake, maybe. So I went down, opened the fridge, had a look at the cake. Maybe if I have a thin slice, just to give me a taste, then I'll be satisfied, then I'll go to sleep. I had my thin slice. By the end of the night, I'd finished the cake. I have a problem with sugar, folks. So I have a problem with sugar, so there's no point standing here telling you all, stop taking sugar. I know how difficult it is. In fact, our brains are wired so that sugar is almost as addictive as heroin. It's very difficult to kick the habit. So I came up with this method, and it's called the Dr. Chidi method, named after some doctor who I've not heard of. The Dr. Chidi method says this. When you see that piece of cake calling your name, you know how it is. The worst thing you can do is to say, I will not eat the cake. If you say, I won't eat the cake, or I shouldn't eat the cake, or I mustn't eat the cake, your brain wants it even more because it's now forbidden. You know, we're just like children. You tell a child, don't touch, it wants to touch. That's us. That's a primitive part of our brain. The best thing to do is to say, okay, I will eat the cake, but I'll eat it in half an hour. Okay, at the same time, you eat yourself an apple. That will release sugar slowly into your system so that after half an hour, you have enough sugar to overcome the desire for the cake. I can see the eyes looking at me. I still want the cake. I didn't want an apple. I want the cake. Well, look, you do the same thing again. Maybe at the end of the day, you've eaten 5 apples. That's good, right? And let me be honest with you. Sometimes you may fail, as I sometimes fail, but I guarantee you will eat fewer cakes on the Dr. Chidi method than if you didn't do it. And by the way, the Dr. Chidi method is not random. It does actually stand for something. It stands for don't resist it, choose to have it, but delay it. Don't resist it, choose to have it, but delay it. You know, we can put that into practice in many areas of life, you know. Choose to have it, but delay it. You go past that shop, those shoes, choose to have them, but delay it. It will save you an awful lot of money. Okay, that's the Dr. Chidi method. Fabulous. All right. How else can I help you? Okay. If you have failed in the Dr. Chidi method, and like me, you may be eating too much cake, how can we stop you? Well, let me show you something. You can see these apples, okay? Imagine I said to you, I want you to eat 4 apples in 1 minute. You have to try to consume 4 apples. You have to do it very quickly. Which apples would you prefer to use? Would you prefer to use the Golden Delicious or the Granny Smith? Now, hands up. Who would prefer the Golden Delicious? Okay, hands up. Those people who prefer it. How many would do the, how many would do the Granny Smith? So to eat quickly, you're going to eat a Granny Smith apple quickly. Now, most people would choose the Golden Delicious because it's easier to consume. It's just sweet. Granny Smith is quite sour. So it becomes a bit painful, but some people still like it. So what we know is that sourness can reduce your appetite for sugar. So if you're eating lots of sweets or cakes or chocolates, just chew on something sour. It can stop you in your tracks. Or, if you don't like the sour, choose something bitter. So people who eat dark chocolate don't tend to eat a lot of chocolate. The people who eat the milk chocolate eat more. So we say bitter is better and sour has the power. Okay, so if you fall off of the Dr. Chidi method, try something sour, try something bitter. All right. So we've talked about milk being a problem with autoimmune. Wheat can also be a problem. In fact, those two proteins, wheat, gluten and casein in milk, those are some of the things that trigger. If you have an autoimmune problem, the two things you'll have to give up initially are wheat and milk, especially if you have a thyroid problem. Wheat is important to give up. So the more you can, in fact, you might say, well, I really like wheat. It's actually not the problem with wheat. Wheat is not the big problem. It's how it's been grown and harvested. So first of all, some of the pesticides that are put on it, but more importantly, how it has been hybridized. You know what I mean? When we grow things and we mix genetically our wheat, there is in the shops, in fact I bought some this week, ancient grains. Have you seen those? Ancient grain wheat. So those seeds are actually they've not been manipulated too much and they don't cause so much of a problem. But most of the wheat that we have and most of the milk that we have, or pretty much all the milk that we have, causes us problems, so we have to avoid it. We know this is not natural. I don't need to remind you. You have to avoid taking the milk from the cow. Now, I said it's wonderful to be here in the sun. Vitamin D plays a huge role in autoimmune disease. In fact, it is one of the most powerful tools to combat autoimmune disease. Sadly, in England, we don't see an awful lot of it. So black people, especially black women in England, suffer terribly with autoimmune diseases. Black women in North America suffer terribly with autoimmune diseases. And because we can't get out in the sun and be on the